An immigration advocate who has seen firsthand the rush of migrants brought to Illinois says the system isn't working, but turning them away...
It's a recipe for discrimination and disaster.
More on McLean County's proposed migrant funding ban coming up on WGLT's Sound Ideas. Good evening, I'm John Norton. Also on today's show, community planners seek feedback on Bloomington Normal's housing shortage. ISU gets the green light to recruit students to its engineering college. It's already attracting a lot of interest.
One of the main things they keep telling me is last year they had 6,000 people call ISU asking about engineering.
And Donald Trump's candidacy in Illinois faces a legal challenge and questions about a loyalty oath he will not sign. Those stories follow a Bloomington Normal News update, which is just ahead. This is Sound Ideas on 89.1 WGLT and WGLT.org, part of the NPR network.
Support for WGLT comes from Bloomington Normal Audiology. Hear My Story continues with local patient Paul Brandt.
So I just went without them for all those years. I talked to somebody who had recently gotten hearing aids and talked about the fact that they were connected to the TV. And so that kind of prompted me to try it again.
Paul's full story can be found at bnaudiology.com.
From the campus of Illinois State University in Normal, this is WGLT's news magazine, Sound Ideas. Good evening, I'm John Norton. An immigrant rights advocate in Normal has been helping recently delivered migrants get work permits and hopes to upscale the services it offers in McLean County. This while McLean County considers a ban on funding any migrant services. Charlotte Alvarez is executive director of the Immigration Project in Normal. It provides immigration legal services throughout central and southern Illinois. Alvarez and her staff spent yesterday in downtown Chicago helping asylum seekers apply for work authorization. It's a short bus ride from the state's new migrant intake center, where some seeking help have been sleeping in buses for weeks. Alvarez tells WGLT's Eric Stock the migrants seeking help are often filled with trauma and confusion, but also hope.
They're hoping for a new life that has stability for them, their family, where they can feel protected and safe and work and contribute to their new homes.
This work authorization just one step of many that they have to go through once they are brought here. Do you feel that they are getting the services they need? Is this system that's been set up very quickly to deal with this, is it working?
The short answer is no, but we're trying our best. Right? So every single person who's processed at the border is given a notice to appear that starts, is a step in a deportation case. So most of the people we see are in some way in the process of being deported from the United States. They have a date to see a judge to start the process to see if they will be deported or they're able to remain in the United States. So that system, immigration courts that are supposed to decide if people should be deported or should be allowed to remain, what are the legal protections and options for that person, is totally overwhelmed. There's over 1 million people in deportation proceedings in this country. There's not enough legal services for those folks. And temporary steps like helping people apply for a work permit or apply for asylum does not meet their full legal needs because they also need someone to advocate for them in that entire deportation process.
Also appears from the accounts that we hear that the city of Chicago itself is overwhelmed by this influx, and there doesn't seem to be a clear plan to address it. They did make some restrictions that caused some buses to go to the suburbs. That's prompted some communities to put restrictions in place for whether they will accept them at all. How well do you feel this has been managed in your view?
I think the situation is extremely difficult because of the lack of communication from the places buses are coming from, right? If the cities and states knew when buses were coming, who's on them, what are their medical needs, what's happening with those folks, then they could better address those needs. But if someone arrives without warning, then it makes it harder, right? So I think that state officials and city officials are doing the best they can with a trying situation. And I want to emphasize that while this influx creates a challenge for now, I really respect that Illinois is recognizing that this is a long-term economic opportunity for our state. If we can provide the services and support that people need right now, then once they have work authorization, they have housing stability, then they're going to be an incredible economic force for our state. And so whatever we can do now to help provide them that emergency humanitarian assistance, our communities are going to reap the rewards of that.
As we continue on Sound Ideas with Charlotte Alvarez from the Immigration Project based in Normal, looking locally now, there has been a group of stakeholders led by McLean County Emergency Management, local public safety, municipalities, etc., on what the community would do if a busload of migrants were to show up here. To what extent has Immigration Project been involved in those discussions?
We've been involved in discussions about changes to our immigrant community for years. McLean County has started those conversations more recently, and so we've been involved in speaking to McLean County Emergency Management, speaking to basically anyone who wants to cooperate and make a plan together, happy to talk and figure out how can we support each other.
What do you make of what you've seen so far in those discussions?
I think that I respect that the emergency management needs to follow state directives. I would hope that as a community, our response of how many people can we open our community to is more than zero, right? That as a community, we can find a way to support and help people who come to our community. I think the solution is not to send everyone to Chicago, where we have seen that buses are residing outside the intake center. People are sleeping on buses, are sleeping sometimes in the street, are sleeping in unsafe conditions.
Which, to be clear, is the state guidance at this point.
Yes. So I respect that there's state guidance. I think that there's opportunities for us collectively to creatively think about how we can work with the state and then also work with our partners locally to say we have a strong community here and we can open our hearts and find a way to help serve folks and get them to state safety and stability.
And that brings us to a resolution that the McLean County Board is set to consider that would reject any funding to provide services for migrants. And the sponsor of this resolution says we can't be sure that all migrants seeking asylum can be trusted and that it would be a drain on the county's limited resources to provide help. What do you make of that plan?
We're strongly opposed to the ordinance, and we will be there to express our opposition in the board meeting looking at this proposal. It's extremely disheartening to see the McLean County proposing this at this time. I think, first off, the types of services that the county provides are services that should be available to everyone who is in that county. They're core essential services. And to say, if we have a young person who is a victim of sexual assault, should they not be able to access the court-appointed special advocates CASA program because of how they arrived in our community? If we have someone who needs an emergency mental health response, should they not get services from the county because of how they arrived in our community? I think it puts us all in danger. Should the sheriff's office be asking questions before they talk to someone to see if they can provide services based on how that person entered the community? I think it's a recipe for discrimination and disaster.
Let's say a busload were to show up, a busload of migrants, and we're talking maybe several. We're looking at dozens and dozens of people. Keeping in mind there's already a housing shortage in the community of about 8,000. How do you see that playing out?
I think that, we would, I respect the emergency management services are going to have an all hands on deck approach. I would hope that we would be involved in those conversations, come in. We're happy to provide interpretation, provide emergency support for folks. There's also several state programs available that designed to support this need, right? And again, I think if we can find ways to support folks when they first arrive, when they're in this moment of crisis, then we're going to reap those economic benefits. So we can process people in. If those individuals reside in a shelter locally, then we can process paperwork for them to get 6 months of housing assistance from the state, for example, right? So I think there's some upper limit of the number of people that our community could serve at any one time. But we're not asking questions about who moves to our community if they're moving from Indiana or from anywhere else, right? When I moved here, no one asked me about my background or what I could provide or opportunities. I just moved here, looked at where I could find opportunity and settled in and started working, right? So I think that we already have 75 to 100 recent arrivals living in McLean County. We are able to do more than we would think. And if we get past an immediate knee-jerk reaction and we start really thinking and planning, we could have a plan that really helps people.
I think people might be surprised to know that that's already going on.
And it hasn't broken anything, right? That's what I'm saying. That you hear the news of, oh my goodness, what if hundreds of people descend on our community at once? How many people come into town for the school year, right? The numbers we're looking at in our community are completely manageable.
That was Charlotte Alvarez from the Immigration Project with WGLT's Eric Stock. Alvarez says the migrants who have settled in McLean County got off a bus sent from the southern border, or they relocated here after going through a migrant processing center. For more on McLean County's proposed ban on funding for migrant services, go to WGLT.org. Stories and conversations around Bloomington Normal and McLean County. This is WGLT's Sound Ideas. Migrants looking for a place to live in Bloomington Normal will likely struggle to find options. According to recent data, the area needs up to 7,500 homes to solve its housing shortage. This week, nearly 100 people gathered to brainstorm solutions. WGLT's Jack Polesnik tells us what they came up with.
The McLean County Planning Commission hosted a public forum Tuesday for community members to come together to discuss the housing situation in Bloomington Normal. Positives and negatives were highlighted, or rather written, by community planner Mark Adams. He led the room at the front with paper and pen and fielded the community's thoughts in SWOT analysis. That's an acronym for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Strengths included zoning changes in the core of downtown Bloomington and positive reviews of the city and town councils recently approving housing developments. Opportunities available to the community included more zoning reforms and rental regulation. Meanwhile, abandoned properties with landlords who won't sell and an unwillingness from people living in neighborhoods to see more homes pop up within their own communities were listed as weaknesses. Upfront rental application fees and inflation were recorded as threats to housing. Multiple people called for action regarding vacancies in Eastland Mall. They said open spaces in the mall, like where Macy's once was, could be a possible site for low-income housing. Transportation came up as a potential issue. Bloomington resident Jesse Henshaw says not having a car and relying on the bus system can make finding the right place difficult.
You just hop in your car, that's so easy to do. But if you have to find the bus stop or if you have to call a cab, can you afford it? Are they available?
Illinois State University student Lily Linden says she and her mother are searching for homes near ISU and her mom's workplace. But with their busy schedules, they can't always tour potential housing immediately. That's become a problem. Linden says helping people who are trying to move out of single-family homes into bigger houses may help people like her, freeing up the smaller single-family homes for those who need them.
If there's a grant or some tax break that we could give them to open up more of the single-family homes, so renters that want to do that can do that and just kind of open up along the chain, that would greatly help our housing problem.
Meanwhile, housing for single people also came up at the forum. John Scott is a recent ISU graduate, and he says more needs to be done to keep people like him around.
And I think that if we had more mixed use as well as just one-bedroom apartments or even studios, I think that would encourage more people who are recent graduates to stay here and build economic growth.
Scott adds he believes housing needs to be treated as a core human need. Community planner Mark Adams says the Regional Planning Commission was ecstatic with the turnout of nearly 100 people, both in person and virtually. Adams says the commission plans to use the feedback to help shape its regional housing recovery plan that it plans to release in late March or early April. I'm Jack Pelesnik.
The Regional Planning Commission is taking feedback until 4 p.m. tomorrow via email and an online form. You can find it in our story at WGLT.org. One reason Bloomington Normal's housing shortage hasn't improved, developers are not building fast enough. Next week on Sound Ideas, government leaders in the Twin Cities weigh in on whether they should break the logjam on housing construction with incentives and what those might look like.
It's very late, but the Emmys are finally happening. TV shows that had their finales nearly a year and a half ago might finally get their flowers. The actors and writers' strikes that brought Hollywood to a halt last year meant no Emmy campaigns.
We might see maybe one of the purest Emmy winners that we've seen in some time.
That's tomorrow on Morning Edition from NPR News.
Wake up with Morning Edition tomorrow morning on 89.1 WGLT.
This is WGLT's news magazine, Sound Ideas. I'm John Norton. Illinois State University has just now been given the okay from the state to begin marketing and recruitment efforts for its forthcoming College of Engineering. This nearly 2 years after the university approved it. But that hasn't stopped thousands of potential students from showing interest, as WGLT's Lindsay Jones explains.
Illinois State University's plan to open its own College of Engineering has been in the works for a while, especially as various milestones in the process have been reached. Most recently, this includes receiving the Illinois Board of Higher Education's approval for its engineering curricula. It's just one step in a bureaucratic process, but engineering founding dean Tom Kaiser says it matters.
So admissions, when people would inquire, was, yeah, it is our plan to do that. They couldn't say it has been approved and a definitive, we will be doing this, but now they can do that. So that made a difference.
Now the College of Engineering can begin marketing and recruitment efforts for its incoming first class in earnest. But Kaiser says already there's been a significant amount of interest shown by prospective students.
When speaking with their admissions people, our initial goal for the first year is about 20 to 150 students. They're pretty convinced we'll be able to get that number. And one of the main things they keep telling me is last year they had 6,000 people call ISU asking about engineering.
Equity and a representative population of students are priorities for the forthcoming college. Kaiser says ISU as a whole has already measured some successes in recruiting diverse students to campus that the college aims to build upon.
Over 7 or 8% of our students are identify as female, and we had around 40% of our incoming class as students from underrepresented groups. So, if we can recruit at those same levels for the College of Engineering and we can hold those levels, it'll be incredible.
Hiring for the College of Engineering's faculty is ongoing. The goal is to have 3 faculty members each in mechanical and electrical engineering hired a year in advance of the fall 2025 semester so they can prepare. An associate dean is expected to be hired in the summer. Kaiser also says construction and renovation work at the John Green Building, where the College of Engineering will eventually be housed, is currently on track for a planned opening in 2026. I'm Lindsay Jones.
ISU plans to kick off its first year of engineering undergraduate programs in the fall of 2025. This is Sound Ideas on WGLT. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump has submitted his paperwork to get on Illinois' ballot this spring. But his filing with the State Board of Elections was met with drama on multiple fronts. Politics reporter Dave McKinney broke 2 stories on Trump's candidacy for Illinois' March 19th primary. He spoke with Melba Lara from Chicago Public Media.
Dave, let's start first with your story from the weekend. Trump is refusing to sign Illinois' loyalty oath. What is that?
Well, Melba, Illinois has had this obscure document that candidates sometimes submit as part of their election paperwork. It dates back to the 1950s, and it's really a vestige from the McCarthy Red Scare era. The oath used to be a compulsory thing in order to get on the ballot, and candidates had to assert that they weren't communists, and in the line that's relevant to Trump, won't advocate for the overthrow of the government. Now, federal courts have determined long ago that this oath is unconstitutional on free speech grounds, but the legislature, they never took it out of Illinois' law books, so it remains for candidates to sign or not sign when they submit paperwork to get on the ballot.
And Donald Trump's not signing that, is he?
Well, I mean, that's where the drama comes in. When Trump ran as a presidential candidate in Illinois in 2016 and in 2020, he signed the loyalty oath, but not this time. I mean, I literally stumbled upon this when I was looking at who was circulating Trump's nominating petitions this time, and I noticed that the loyalty oath was missing. And so I called a source at the State Board of Elections, and he confirmed that that was the case. Now, Trump's campaign gave me a statement, but it didn't really provide a reason why he didn't sign it after doing it 2 previous times. And let's remember the timing here, Melba. Trump chose not to submit this just days before the 3-year anniversary of the January 6th insurrection, for which he's been criminally charged.
And Dave, I noticed this weekend that this got a lot of attention. Even President Biden was weighing in on the story.
I know. I mean, President Biden's campaign, they didn't know about this until I called them. They soon began circulating the story because it coincided with a major speech that Biden delivered on Trump's role in the January 6th insurrection. On Facebook, Biden said, and I quote here, "I said Donald Trump is willing to sacrifice our democracy to put himself in power. I wasn't exaggerating." Now, Biden signed Illinois' loyalty oath, as did Republican Ron DeSantis, but Republicans Nikki Haley and Chris Christie did not.
Dave, I want to move on to another sticking point with Trump's candidacy. When he did file in Illinois, he was met with a challenge to his nominating petitions to get him booted from the ballot over his ties to the January 6th riot. This is also happening in other states. Why is this an issue in Illinois?
Well, yeah, as you point out, I mean, there are pending objections to Trump's candidacy in 15 other states. And 2 states, Colorado and Maine, they've already knocked him off the ballot. In Illinois and all of those states, the objections center on language in the 14th Amendment that was ratified right after the Civil War, and the language bars insurrectionists from seeking public office. Here in Illinois, the objection was brought by a national voting rights group, 5 Illinois voters, and 2 law firms from Chicago. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court recently agreed to review the Colorado case, and a decision is really going to dictate the direction that this Illinois objection goes.
And until the U.S. Supreme Court weighs in procedurally, what's going to happen next in Illinois?
I mean, we're 10 weeks out from our primary elections, and the first step here is the objection is going to go to the nonpartisan State Board of Elections, and they're going to have a meeting on this January 30th. If this group of objectors doesn't get what it wants from the State Election Board, and the U.S. Supreme Court still hasn't given any kind of guidance here, I think what you're going to see is that this is going to move into Illinois' court system. And what you have to remember about the Illinois Supreme Court, where all of this could land, there's a 5-2 Democratic majority on the court.
Dave, always great to talk to you. Thanks for the update.
Thanks, Melba.
That was politics reporter Dave McKinney speaking with Melba Laura. And that's Sound Ideas today. WGLT's news magazine is made possible in part by Bloomington Normal Audiology. I'm John Norton. Story help today came from WGLT's Eric Stock, Lindsey Jones, and Jack Polesnik. This is 89.1 WGLT and WGLT.org, part of the NPR network.